Being ripped apart from the inside by giant wooden stakes. Having your body blown to pieces by a gunpowder cannon. Being relentlessly tormented by Barney the Purple Dinosaur. And those are just the humane ones. Welcome to the 50 worst punishments in the history of mankind. Number 50. Bastinado. Sometimes you just need to accept defeat, especially when the soles on those feet are being vigorously beaten. Also known as falanga, falaka, and the simple straightforward foot whipping, this brutal punishment is exactly what it says on the label. A knotted cane is lashed against the soles of the victim's feet. Because of the sensitive nerve endings on your soles, if the punishment is applied too brutally, it can leave you hobbling for the rest of your life. The punishment's been recorded in the US, Mexico, Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, colonial India, Cambodia, China, and many more. It was so historically widespread that it even made it into a Shakespeare play, As You Like It, the works of Mark Twain, and Mozart's The Magic Flute. And we're sad to tell you that there's evidence of it still being practiced today in a number of African and Middle Eastern countries. Number 49. The Scold's Bridle. Making you feel horrific pain and humiliation just for being a woman who spoke back? That's what the point of the mask is. From the 16th to the 19th century, all throughout Europe, if a woman was accused of being a scold, which could just mean blaspheming, gossiping, talking out of turn, being rude, or just annoying a man, she might be sentenced to the Scold's Bridle. It's a metal cage fitted around the victim's head with a spiked metal gag that depresses the victim's tongue and prevents them from speaking. If this didn't seem excessively cruel and dehumanizing enough, women wearing the bridle would often be paraded around town so their neighbors could mock or even throw things at them for fun. This won't be the last time you hear that happening in this video, we're afraid. Number 48. The Spanish Donkey. If this donkey takes you for a ride, you might be able to do an uncanny impression of a wishbone afterward. Also known as the chevalet and the far more boring wooden horse. Come on guys, give us some creativity. This unholy device was actually a common fixture by the Holy Inquisitions from the 12th century and beyond. It even saw use as recently as the American Civil War. So what exactly did this horrible thing do? It looks like a minimalist wooden horse with a sharp edge on the top that victims would be forced to straddle, with the sharp edge being positioned between their, well, there's no more elegant way to say this, their butt cheeks. They'd be forced to sit there for hours or even days as they're interrogated, with weights being placed on their feet to make the torture even worse. Those who didn't bleed to death on the donkey or pass away from infection would spend the rest of their lives with annihilated genitals and an inability to not walk like John Wayne. There are even accounts of American hero Paul Revere sentencing people to sit on the Spanish donkey. What the heck, Paul? Number 47. The Pillory. While this wooden monstrosity wouldn't split your butt in two, it would put you at the mercy of all the worst people in your town. If you were convicted of a petty offense, you might have found yourself bound by the neck and hands in an elevated wooden structure in a public place. Your head and facial hair shaved, you'd be a public display of embarrassment, which all the locals could attend to as they pleased, whether it was throwing rotten vegetables, feces, or even physically assaulting you. If you're thinking, wait, isn't that the stockade? That's a common misconception. The pillory binds the head and neck, and the stockade binds the feet. Post-1800, it was mainly a punishment for perjury. Thankfully, the use of this barbaric device is confined to the distant past, except in Delaware, where it was only abolished in 1905. Number 46. Thumbscrew. We'd give the ingenuity of this torture instrument 2 big thumbs up if our thumbs still worked. Owing to the cruelty of early modern Europe, this miniature vice, with, as the name suggests, a screw mechanism, was designed to slowly but surely obliterate the bones in a victim's thumbs. Sometimes, if the designer was feeling particularly sadistic, they might include spikes that punctured the nails before they crushed the bones. But we know what you're thinking. What if my intended victim has already lost their thumbs? Luckily, variations of the thumb screws have been made that destroy the big toes, and also ones that could crush all 5 fingers on a hand. Variety is the spice of life. Number 45. Yakuza Finger Removal. Life in organized crime might seem glorious, but in Japan, if you mess up, it'll be your little piggies that are getting the chop. Known as yubitsume or finger shortening, under the honor system of the Japanese Yakuza, if you mess up, you might need to reclaim your standing by removing the top joint from your pinky finger with a razor-sharp tanto knife. The removed digit portion will then be respectfully mailed to Oyabun, the family boss of a particular syndicate the short-fingered gangster works for. It's kind of like a YouTube apology video, but slightly less embarrassing. Number 44. The Brazen Bull. If you don't like getting roasted to death, then move on. The brazen bull of Phalaris was a possibly apocryphal method of execution created by Paralaus, the Athenian engineer, for the cruel dictator named, you guessed it, Phalaris. But this decision ended up being rather perilous for Paralaus in the end, as he ended up being its first victim. The metal nightmare allegedly worked by trapping the victim inside a giant bronze bull and lighting a fire beneath it. Slowly, the victim would get cooked inside, and the smoke of their burning body would jet out of the brazen bull's nostrils, and the echoing screams of the victim would sound like the bull's roars. And yes, Phalaris did, as legend goes, see fit to use the bull's creator to take it for a spin. There's a lesson about karma in there. Number 43. Strapado. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition, but you can expect them to break your arms. Another infamous method of papal torture during the medieval era was the strapado, also known as the cords, which involved tying the victim's arms behind their back and hoisting them up into the air by their wrists on a winch. They'd either be suspended for long periods or dropped and hoisted again, slowly wrenching your shoulders out of their sockets. Number 42. The Judas Cradle. Fair warning, this one is gonna make you clench. This is another alleged favorite of the Inquisition, a pointed triangular block of wood on a raised wooden structure which the victim would be positioned on with the tip of the pyramid sticking up their rear end. As the torture progressed, weights would be tied to their feet to send the point further into their body, slowly mutilating them to death. Told you, it'd make you clench. Number 41. Impalement. Because we're not done terrorizing your chocolate starfish just yet. Perhaps most famously used by a certain Wallachian monarch, Vlad the Impaler, there were two ways an impalement would go down. If you were lucky, a pointed stick would be forced through your abdomen, killing you with blood loss. If you were less lucky, a rounded pole would be shoved up your anus, and your own body weight would force the pole further in, slowly displacing your organs and killing you with massive physical trauma. Doing this is the kind of thing that might make people in the future think you're a literal vampire. Number 40. Flogging. A true, nightmarish classic, people just beating the living hell out of you. Perhaps one of the most common forms of corporal punishment in history is flogging a person with either blunt instruments or a whip. It'd be impossible to list all the ways that flogging's been used to punish people throughout history, but maybe the most recent and infamous is the use of flogging by whip on black slaves in the United States and abroad. Just because it's less elaborate than something the Inquisition might do doesn't make it any less upsetting. Number 39. Cannon execution. This one will blow you away. Also known as blowing from a gun, this barbaric form of execution came into use almost as soon as gunpowder cannons came into prominence. It's most commonly associated with the oppression of India by British colonial powers. Victims would be tied to the front of cannons with their bodies up against the barrel, and the cannon would be fired, blowing the victim to pieces. In some cases, when grape shot was used, the shot was fired through the bodies of the victims and ended up mutilating the spectators. Given that they were turning up to watch an execution, we can't say we feel that bad for them being in the splash zone. Number 38. Hanging. A quick but undignified death. Hanging is one of the oldest and most simplest methods of execution. All you need is a rope and a strong elevated platform. The victims would die of a broken neck in the best case scenario, and asphyxiation in the less ideal case. But while this death could often be quick, there are some humiliating post-mortem side effects. Not only are the people executed by hanging liable to void their bowels at considerable speeds, but if someone with a penis dies by hanging, they've got a decent chance of developing a death erection, also known as a terminal erection, and angel lust. Hanging really is a hard way to go. Number 37. The disco. Described as torture light by some, anyone who's been detained at a CIA black site might have been subjected to a 24-hour rotation of music played at ear-splitting volumes. In case you're wondering, the track lists include Metallica, Queen, and even some songs from the Barney and Friends soundtrack. And that's torture enough at normal volume. Number 36. Mazzatello. Another papal torture that treats its victims like cattle. Despite being so holier than thou, the church certainly had a huge number of ways to violently kill people who broke their laws, but few had the brutal simplicity of the Mazzatello. Victims would be bashed over the back of the head with a huge mallet, and if that didn't fully kill them, the executioner would pull out a knife and slit the victim's throat. Number 35. The guillotine. Giving a simple beheading a touch of class. Made famous during the French Reign of Terror, This machine, proposed first as a more humane alternative to other methods of capital punishment, has been used to quickly and efficiently lop off the heads of thousands of prisoners during mass execution events. That is, if the blade is kept sharp. When the guillotine executions fail, the result is really messy. Number 34. Scaphism. Put down the sandwich, buddy, because this one is beyond disgusting. While we hope this one isn't real, it's believed to be the fate of the boastful soldier Mithridates in ancient Persia. For killing the rebellious brother of the king and then bragging about it, he was sentenced to die by scaphism, also known as the boats. He was force-fed milk and honey until he experienced severe diarrhea. Then, smothered in the milk and honey concoction, he was trapped between two boats and pushed out to the water, where flies and vermin began to eat him over the course of days. Every so often he'd be brought back and treated, then force-fed more milk and honey, so his suffering could go on for even longer. The moral of the story? Don't irritate an ancient Persian king. Number 33. Lethal injection. This is a more modern method of execution, but that doesn't mean it isn't horrifying. People executed by lethal injection have a deadly chemical concoction pumped into their veins by a group of doctors. Wait, no, sorry. Doctors aren't actually allowed to take part in these executions due to the rules in the Hippocratic Oath. As such, the execution technicians are not highly trained medical professionals. Because of this, some botched lethal injections have resulted in horrifically painful deaths. Number 32. Immurement. Fans of Edgar Allan Poe will love this one. You've heard the term lock 'em up and throw away the key, but a step further is when you don't need a key at all, because immurement is the process of breaking up a victim inside a cell with no doors and no windows, a punishment where, in some situations, the victim might live for years before eventually expiring. What kind of monstrous crime would warrant this kind of punishment? Ancient Roman virgin priestesses, known as Vestal Virgins, would be bricked up forever if they broke their vows, which doesn't really feel proportional if you ask us. Number 31. Gibbeting. Picture a scold's bridle, but it's over your entire body, and you're gonna die in there. The device, known as a gibbet, is a particularly cruel form of public execution. Criminals would be locked away in this full-body cage and left to hang in place until they died of thirst or exposure to the elements, at which point their bodies might be left there to rot and be pecked at by birds. Number 30. Mobile execution units. This nasty little innovation in state-approved death from the People's Republic of China is to execution what food trucks are to traditional restaurants. As a way of making capital punishment as efficient as possible, these four-man crew buses drag their victims inside, execute their victims by lethal injection, and harvest their organs for donation. It may be completely nightmarish, but there's no denying that it's execution elevated to maximum productivity. Number 29. Death by elephant. For royalty in South and Southeast Asia, though particularly ancient India, killing your most reviled criminals with an elephant from your menagerie was a classier way to execute, and if you think it'd be quick and painless, we're sorry to disappoint you. Trained to carry out their master's commands, these elephants could kill their victims as fast or as slow as they desired. Whether it's a quick stomp to the head or being crushed limb by limb, execution by an elephant is an extremely unpleasant way to go. Number 28. Crucifixion. A method of execution so iconic it's become the symbol for one of the world's most popular religions. Crucifixion is a barbaric form of execution that involves nailing a convicted criminal to a cross by their hands and feet. There are some variations to this method of execution, but generally, the victim would be left to suffer up on the cross until they died of exposure, thirst, or succumbed to their injuries. It makes getting hanged in the gibbet look positively pleasant. Number 27. The breaking wheel. It turns out the cross isn't the worst piece of wood you could be attached to. This antiquated European method of execution entailed tying a victim to a large wooden wheel, and over a number of hours, the theatrical executioner would either meticulously break or dismember the victim limb by limb for a wild crowd. In the end, if the victim didn't succumb to their injuries, the executioner would deliver a coup de grace, chopping off the victim's head. But before you get too high and mighty about the people watching these back then, remember the video you're watching right now. Number 26. Waist chop. If you ever worry you're spending too much money on shoes and pants, then maybe the waist chop would be a blessing in disguise. This ancient Chinese art will render your body into two parts, because this method of execution is exactly what it sounds like. The executioner would bind the victim to a table and then use a huge blade to cut the victim in half at the waist, While this method of execution hasn't endured to the modern day, the idea of something being chopped at the waist has still endured as a popular phrase in China, often used to refer to a TV show being cancelled. A similar equivalent in Japan is Ikaido, which translates to living torso, where a pair of men with katanas would slice their victims at the torso and neck, slicing them in two. This wasn't always a method of execution, too. Sometimes it was used to test the sharpness of new swords. Two birds, one slash. Number 25. Tunica molesta. It's Latin for annoying shirt, which is darkly funny given that this ancient execution method won't annoy you, it'll kill you in a pretty agonizing fashion. The tunic would be woven with pitch and then set on fire, immolating the wearer. Historians can't agree on who exactly used the tunica molesta, but if it's true that the infamous Roman Emperor Nero was behind it, we couldn't deny that it would certainly track with everything else we know about that guy. Number 24. Death by sawing. This is not only one of the most painful ways to die, it specifically is designed to make sure that you stay awake to experience the whole thing. There are a few different variations of death by sawing, but in the most infamous, the victim is tied upside down by the ankles. Then a large two-person hacksaw is placed against the taint of the victim, and then they're manually sawed in half from taint to head, slicing them in two evenly segmented pieces. And because the victim is upside down, the blood rushes to their head and they'll remain conscious for the whole experience. After all, why would you want to miss a second of yourself being sawn in half lengthwise? Number 23. Live burial. It's one of your worst nightmares realized. But if you irritated certain pre-German tribes or Chinese Emperor Qin Shi Huang, you might find yourself beneath the earth, waiting to die of suffocation. It's not exactly a complicated way to kill somebody, but it certainly feels plucked from your darkest ideas of how you might slide off the mortal coil. But on the upside, once you do die, they at least don't need to bury you. We'd like to look on the bright side here at the Infographic Show. Number 22. Necklacing. Normally, oppressive governments use torture and execution against the people. This time, it was the other way around. Apartheid in South Africa was a brutal system that kept black people as second-class citizens, and any attempts to fight back were swiftly beaten down. Some members of the resistance movement adopted necklacing, the practice of filling a tire with gasoline and hanging it around a victim's neck, then setting it alight, as a way of ensuring other black people didn't turn their back on the movement. It's a horrible way to die, and one of the most recent methods of horrific punishment on the list. Number 21. Marooning. If you're a pirate who's just tried and failed to commit mutiny against your captain, you might find yourself left to die on a desert island while you reflect on the terrible things you've done. This is the process of marooning. And unless you feel ready to pull a Captain Jack Sparrow and find a secret rum cache or rope two sea turtles together with hair from your back, your body is likely going to be found rotting on the island when your captain comes back to maroon the next sorry sap who tried to mutiny him. Number 20. Ling Chi. Also known as slow slicing, the lingering death, and most infamously the death of 1,000 cuts, this is China's most iconic method of execution. Acting as a kind of lacerative Chinese counterpart to the breaking wheel, a person convicted of a particularly nasty crime, such as treason, will be tied up and expertly murdered cut by cut at the hand of an expert executioner. While a lot of victims wouldn't literally survive 1,000 cuts, they would be severely mutilated before they eventually died. And like many forms of early execution, it was often made a public spectacle. Number 19. Keel hauling. Another nautical nightmare. If you committed a terrible crime at sea, your fellow sailors might tie you up and throw you over the side of the ship. You'd then be dragged beneath the keel, scraping you along the barnacles embedded in the bottom of the ship. If you were lucky and you fell a little deeper, you might not be scraped against the barnacles, but you would almost definitely drown. Whether you'd rather be keel-hauled or marooned is between you and your captain. Number 18. Hanging, drawing, and quartering. It was one of the most iconic and elaborate methods of execution of all time, most famously used against Guy Fawkes and hundreds if not thousands of others. So beyond the obvious, how does it actually work? It starts with the drawing, where a victim is tied to a horse and dragged publicly to the place of execution. Then there's the hanging. But the hanging isn't fatal, it's done to the moment of almost death. But the executioners want the victims to be alive for the next part. The victims would then have their genitals cut off, be disemboweled, have their head cut off, and then be cut into 4 pieces. If you were hanged, drawn, and quartered in England, your severed head would be mounted on a spike on London Bridge to serve as a deterrent for other criminals. Number 17. Gas chambers. This method of execution has been used by a variety of countries, including the United States, but its most infamous usage was by the Nazis during the Second World War, where gas chambers were a key component of the genocidal mass murders committed against Jewish people and other persecuted minorities in their concentration camps. The intention of gas chambers is either to poison or asphyxiate the victim to death within an airtight room. Carbon monoxide and hydrogen cyanide are common agents, but in the case of the Nazi gas chambers, the more specific method of murder was the cyanide-based pesticide Zyklon B. Number 16. Flaying. That's just a fancy way of saying skinned alive. There's been a long tradition of flaying as a punishment in various countries, but the true art of flaying is trying to keep as much of the skin intact as possible as it's being peeled off. The executioner will also endeavor to keep the victim alive until all the skin is fully removed. According to dermatologist Ernst J. Jung, the actual causes of death for a person who's been skinned alive are shock, blood loss, hypothermia, and infection. Personally, we think we'd die of the other kind of shock if we ever saw this happening. Number 15. Electric chair. The horror at the far end of the Green Mile. This method of fiery electrical death was invented by a dentist in 1881 and has been one of the most enduring and iconic methods of American execution. It works by passing a powerful electric shock through the body of the victim, causing cardiac arrest. However, it isn't always that simple. Part of the reason the electric chair has been largely outmoded is that when the executions go wrong, the deaths have been slow, grueling, and incredibly upsetting to watch. Number 14. Death flights. Most sane people don't like flying, but even then they're not being thrown out of the plane to their deaths. It's been employed by a number of vicious dictators, including Augusto Pinochet of Chile and Jorge Rafael Videla of Argentina. And it's an incredibly effective way to send a message by taking your political enemies on a plane or a helicopter ride and showing them that flying is really just falling with style. Number 13. Colombian necktie. Imagine a really irritated cartel sicario holding a dagger up to your throat. You might be about to experience one of the most infamous punishments that South American drug cartels have been known to deal out to people who have wronged them. In essence, to perform a Colombian necktie, the killer would slash the victim's throat and pull their wriggling tongue out of the hole in the neck, letting it dangle down from the throat like a flesh necktie. Incidentally, drug cartels are the ones keeping some of the more archaic forms of punishment alive today. Along with a myriad of other nasty things, drug cartels still regularly practice decapitation, flaying, and emasculation. Talk about embracing tradition. Number 12. Stoning. This Abrahamic method of execution still sadly endures in some places today. Typically reserved for crimes of a religious nature, people sentenced to die by stoning would either be bound or even partially buried, at which point a crowd of people, each taking a stone, will throw them at the victim until they're bludgeoned to death. In a famous Bible story, Jesus even pointed out the hypocrisy of stoning, preventing an angry mob from stoning someone by saying, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." Sadly, this same hypocrisy has rarely stopped people from engaging in the act in real-life instances throughout history. The Japanese had their own particular brand of ritualistic stoning called ishikozume, where the victims would be buried up to their waists before being stoned to death. Number 11. Execution by firing squad. The 21-gun salute is a great military honor unless those guns are all pointing at you. Execution by firing squad is a form of capital punishment often used by various historical militaries during wartime as a punishment for crimes like desertion and mutiny. And there are typically some pretty strict rules and regulations around conducting these kinds of executions. Multiple soldiers fire their weapons at once, so the responsibility for the killing shot doesn't fall on one person. The soldiers would also often be instructed to aim for the heart so as to not mutilate the face of the person being shot. It feels barbaric, but it's honestly one of the quickest methods of death on this list. However, in some cases there might be downsides for the victim's family beyond just losing a loved one. Certain governments that have executed criminals by firing squads may charge their family a bullet fee, where they're made to pay for the bullets used to kill their relative. Bleak. Number 10. Burning. Humans have been doing this one basically since they discovered fire. Whether tied to a stake or bound to a pyre, it's always been relatively easy to burn someone alive. However, this punishment has often taken on a strangely gendered quality. as the punishment of burning has often been turned against women in particular. In the most infamous historical example, there's witch burning, where women accused of witchcraft have been tied up and set on fire. The pain is said to be the worst at the start of the process because after a certain point the fire destroys the sensory nerves in the skin. In Southeast Asia, there's even the particularly grim topic of bride burning, a form of dowry murder where husbands will set their wives alight in order to punish her and her family for not paying a big enough marriage dowry. Yikes! Number 9. Boiling alive. Burning is bad, but this is worse. Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. People would be lowered into a large cauldron full of boiling water with a hook and a pulley system. Boiling someone alive takes a lot longer to kill them than burning, plus the rather humiliating element of being reduced to broth once the execution is done. Number 8. Racking. Ever wished you could be taller, with longer arms and longer legs? The rack can make this possible at the cost of not being able to walk. Racks are large wooden tables fitted with shackles and either ropes or chains which are bound to the victim's wrists and ankles. As the torture progresses, the torturer turns a crank, painfully stretching out the limbs and eventually dislocating the joints. It's one of the quintessential medieval torture instruments that you've probably seen in at least one piece of media. Number 7. Waterboarding. While this method of torture has been used for an incredibly long time, the most infamous uses were in the War on Terror during the 2000s. This torture's widespread use is largely owed to its brutal simplicity. All you need is a source of water and a piece of cloth. The cloth is placed over the victim's face and the water is poured into the cloth, simulating the sensation of drowning. The victim will also often have a black hood placed over their head, so they don't know when to expect the water and thus will be taken off guard by the water. Even hardened CIA agents can barely tolerate it for more than a couple of minutes. Of course, drowning of the more traditional variety has also been a common form of both torture and execution. All you need is a source of water for this one. You don't even need the cloth. Number 6. Mock execution. You don't always need to kill someone to torment them. Sometimes it's just enough to make them think they're gonna die. In order to psychologically torture victims, a number of oppressive regimes have made captives believe they're going to die before pulling the rug out from under them at the last minute. One common method of mock execution is having a victim blindfolded with a gun pressed up against their head or firing a gun just off to the side of the victim's head. It's another form of torture that entered the zeitgeist following reports of its usage against detainees of the US military during the War on Terror. Number 5. Rat torture. Game of Thrones fans will be familiar with this nasty little number. Most common in the Middle Ages, this torture involved trapping a rat in a box or a bucket up against the body of a victim. A source of heat would be placed up against the bottom of the containment unit, which caused the rat to begin to panic and try to escape the heat, which it does by clawing and chewing its way through the victim. While the Middle Ages gave us that one, it didn't end there. Multiple reports from the 1960s through the 1990s indicate that a number of South American dictators in countries like Chile and Argentina were still more than happy to use it on their prisoners. Number 4. The Blood Eagle. While evidence is pretty thin that this horrific nightmare ever existed outside of Norse legends, it existed in the nightmares of history fans for a long time. According to the legends, this Viking method of torture involves tying someone up to a tree with their belly up against the trunk. The torturer would then slice into the victim's back, cracking through the ribs and pulling the lungs out of the body cavity so they rest against the back like a pair of fleshy wings. A blood eagle. Yeah, we hope this exists just as a legend too. Number 3. White torture. No, we don't mean listening to Vanilla Ice's discography. We mean a horrifying form of Iranian psychological torture inflicted on political dissidents. To understand this torture though, you first need to understand something about psychology. The human brain requires new stimuli, and in the absence of new stimuli, it will create its own. It's why your face starts to look a little strange when you stare at yourself in the mirror for too long. White torture takes this phenomenon to logical extremes, trapping a victim in a completely white room where the lights are kept at full intensity 24 hours a day. Even the guards, whom the victim would rarely see, would dress in completely white costumes. Over time, the sheer level of psychological boredom coupled with stress and sleep deprivation would result in hallucinations and psychosis, torturing the prisoners in a hell of their own making. Number 2. The Pear of Anguish. This elegant but horrifying little device, also known as the choke pear, was designed to expand out like a flower as the crank on its back was twisted. It wouldn't kill the victims, but this singularly unpleasant device expanding in your throat was sure to leave you with traumatic memories for the rest of your life. Though sadly, the mouth was not the only orifice that the pair of anguish was used to torment. And of course, number 1. The head crusher. For our money, this is one of the gnarliest punishments of all. Picture a nutcracker, but for a human head rather than a delicious walnut. Formed of a large metal crushing implement attached to a crank, the torturer would slowly crank the head crusher and increase the tightness of the device around the victim's skull. If it was cranked all the way, you could expect to see your brain splattered all over the wall. But even if you survived, you'd probably be doing it with a deformed skull and face for the rest of your life. Wasn't the past lovely? Which method of punishment horrified you the most? Let us know down in the comments. Now check out insane Japanese torture methods used during World War II, Unit 731, or watch this instead.